Yo, what is up, y'all? It's Cone back here again tonight with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from the night. But not just tonight, I'm going to be recapping all 8 game ones in this video, giving you my big takeaways. It's a lot of playoff basketball to cover, so we're going to go ahead and get right into it. Just make sure to leave a like and subscribe, it helps me out a ton. I'm going to be recapping playoff games almost every single night, if not like every other night, alongside the usual content that I drop throughout the week. So it's a really fun time to be a basketball fan, so don't miss out on all the content that's going to be coming out. So drop a subscribe, helps me out a lot. But going into things, we're going to start off with what was probably the game of the year so far, and definitely the best of the game ones, Boston versus Brooklyn. Going into this is a series that me and many others pegged as one of our favorites. This is one that I, in my playoff predictions video, said I thought was going to go 7 games, that it could go either way, and it lived up to all of the hype. Kyrie Irving, like, going against the crowd, like flicking off fans and then dropping like a 30 bomb. I think he had 39 in this one, including a 3 right at the end of the game that looked like it might have been a dagger before other events unfolded. You had crazy back and forths with Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, really as a team, making a ton of plays, all of it culminating in the last possession of the game, a super chaotic one, where Jason Tatum ends up hitting the first buzzer beater for the Celtics in a playoff game since Paul Pierce. It was incredible. It was all that I really could have asked for from this game. Huge defensive possessions from Marcus Smart, buckets being traded between the superstars in this series. It was a lot, and I don't think, really just, I think what it told me about this series is that it's going to be a fight. These two teams are going to have to fight tooth and nail every single game just to squeak out one win here and there. Because for a while, it looked like the Nets were dead in the water in this game. The Celtics kind of started to take over in the third quarter, and then the Brooklyn Nets came back from down, I believe, 14 in the fourth quarter to bring this one right up until the end to lose by 1 point. When you have Kyrie and Kevin Durant on your team, there really is no lead that the opposing team can have that is safe, and that really showed in this game. Boston did a pretty good job of punishing the lack of size on Brooklyn's end. Al Horford destroyed them on the glass and in the paint down below, scoring like 20 points. Of course, like I mentioned, Jason Tatum was incredible. Marcus Smart was great defensively. Kevin Durant wasn't quite Kevin Durant, which if Nets fans want to take something from this, they were right up in this one until the very, very end, literal the last possession of the game, and Kevin Durant didn't play that well. So that does kind of bode well for the Nets going forward, but even so, I think it shows that the Celtics are able to slow Kevin Durant. They threw a lot of different things at him in this game. You had a lot of different defenders who played really well on him, including one possession towards the end of the game where Al Horford clamped him up, which was super impressive from their center, especially for a guy who's like 34, 35 years old. But defensive effort like that is what has gotten the Celtics to this point, and it's what's going to get them through to the second round if they beat Brooklyn. They're going to have to be versatile on defense, throw different looks at different guys. Ime Udoka just kept bringing new schemes out, left and right, throwing different defenses, different players at these guys, and every single person on the Celtics executed right up until the end. Kyrie and Kevin Durant were kind of just hitting tough shots, especially Kyrie Irving. It'll be really interesting to see how both of these teams adjust in game 2, because, I mean, it went pretty well for both teams. Just in the end, the Celtics had the ball last, and Jason Tatum made it pay. He's always been a big playoff performer. It's been shown in the past in his career, leading the Celtics to the Eastern Conference Finals in his rookie season. Tatum's just one of those guys. He's a guy that really steps it up big time in the playoffs. Same with Kyrie Irving, same with Kevin Durant, even though he had this rough game. He's going to bounce back in a big way. I'm so excited. It kind of blows my mind that one of these two teams is going to lose in round 1, and I think it just goes to show how deep the Eastern Conference is this season, that one of these two teams won't make it out of the first round, because either of these teams are a team I could see making a chance or going towards the finals and trying to win a championship. So it's kind of ridiculous that they're playing in round 1. It just happens. The Celtics fought back all season to get the second seed and got rewarded with Brooklyn. It happens. But overall, huge win for Boston. They had to get this one, and now go into game 2 with a little bit of momentum off that game winner. Crowd's going to be, of course, loud as hell again with Kyrie Irving in the building. I'm interested to see the way it goes. This was probably the best game of the weekend. After that game, Raptor Sixers is one that I wanted to talk about. The Sixers won by 20 points, which is not something that I expected, especially over the course of this game. The Sixers were playing really, really well for most of it. They were up 8 at the end of the first quarter. They were up 18 at half, but the Raptors really brought this one way back in the third and fourth quarters. But in the end, really, Tyrese Maxey just exploded offensively. He ends up dropping 39 points in this one, which was incredible. And something that I said in my playoff predictions video is that the key, or really just even the video breaking down this series in particular, the key for the Sixers Joel Embiid's going to be fine. Embiid is good. You can't really stop Joel Embiid, especially not with the way that he's been playing this season. You can slow him down a little bit, but for me, the way the Sixers are going to win this series and ultimately their goal of a championship is the way that Tyrese Maxey plays, as well as Tobias Harris. Those two guys have to be good. They don't even have to be good. They've got to be really good. And that's exactly what they were. Tobias Harris had 26, 6, and 6. You had Maxey, as I mentioned, with 38 points. Harden was pretty solid. He wasn't scoring the ball much, but he had 14 dimes. A lot of them were in super critical possessions too, to go with 22 points. And Embiid only had 19 and 15. And the Sixers won by 20 points. This was a huge win for the Sixers. It showed a lot of how they can lock in. I was really impressed by what I saw. And now I feel like the series is going to be a lot quicker than I thought it was initially, especially because Gary Trent Jr., Scotty Barnes, and Thaddeus Young are doubtful for next game. Scotty Barnes had an ankle injury in this one. Thaddeus Young, I believe it was his thumb. He sprained it. And then Gary Trent Jr. just has an illness. So we'll see if any of those three guys are able to come back for this next game. But if they go down 2-0, it's really going to be hard to get that momentum back. And if any three of those guys missed more than one game, it just takes a lot out of a Raptors team that is really kind of reliant on their starters, especially so if you're without Barnes, who was probably the best Raptor in this game, as well as Gary Trent Jr., who, even though he struggled, has ability to really pop off. And one of the things I mentioned in that series video is that Gary Trent Jr. and really just him and Scotty Barnes are keys to the series, because I kind of trust Van Vliet and Siakam to produce, but Gary Trent Jr. is one of those guys that can pop off for 30 on one night, or have a night where he's shooting like 9 of 21 or something like that. And same with Scotty Barnes. He's a guy who can have some rough shooting nights, but he can be a stabilizing force when he is scoring the ball, and he was phenomenal in that last game. It's just unfortunate that the ankle injury happened. I think the Sixers, really what they showed me in this game, and I think they showed the world, is that they're a lot more locked in than maybe people would have previously thought, and I was super impressed by what I saw from them. So shout to Doc Rivers and shout to the Sixers. He also played Paul Reed instead of DeAndre Jordan, which was a huge plus and showed me that, you know, maybe he's actually listening to people and he's actually giving Paul Reed a chance, who I think works so much better for this team than DeAndre Jordan. So hopefully he keeps playing going forward. After that game, let's talk about Minnesota versus Memphis, because Minnesota went out and stole game one from the Memphis Grizzlies, 130 to 117, to take away home court advantage from the Grizzlies at this point. Really what shown in this game was Steven Adams really struggled. He's been someone who has had a phenomenal season for the Grizzlies, but just in this game, he could not stay on the court. He had 0 points, only 3 boards, and 3 assists in 24 minutes, and he was getting abused offensive or defensively. He just doesn't have the foot speed to keep up with a guy like Cat. And one of the biggest things that the Grizzlies benefit from when Steven Adams is on the court is how he grabs boards. Dave really relied on his rebounding, his interior presence, and overall just his ability to grab not just defensive but offensive rebounds. But he's being pulled out by Cat. So on the defensive end, when the shot goes up, Cat has him all the way out in the perimeter, and so the Timberwolves are running in, getting these offensive rebounds off of hustling, getting second chance opportunities, and it just really took the Grizzlies out of their rhythm. I'm not sure if he's going to have to play less. Brandon Clark played better than Steven Adams in this game as like a small ball center, but like Adams can't really keep up with Towns, and even then you can't really put Clark on Towns because he's a little too small. You could put Jaren Jackson Jr. on him, but his big problem has always been his inability to avoid fouling, and if you put him on Cat, he's going to foul out in like 5 minutes. So I'm not really sure what their answer is for Cat. Same with Anthony Edwards, who had 36. They really didn't have someone who was both quick and big enough to stop Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards has kind of he has some explosive games, but there are some games where he kind of cools off a little bit. So I'm curious to see what game we get from him next. I'm sure Taylor Jenkins is going to come up with a great scheme because he's been a phenomenal coach all season. But the Timberwolves are going to make this a series. Like I said in my video, the Timberwolves aren't going to go away easily. I predicted Grizzlies in 6. The Timberwolves, I think, could take a game 2 or maybe even 3 in this one, but they showed that they're more than just like a fun, young story as a play-in team. They kind of did a little bit to the Grizzlies what the Grizzlies did to the Jazz last year, where you had this like juggernaut of a team coming into the playoffs. You had this young play-in team that came in with, like, they're hungry, they have a lack of experience, but they just know they're going to go out there and do what they can. They went ahead and stole the game the same way the Grizzlies did to the Jazz. Now we'll see if the Grizzlies can respond the way that the Jazz did last year. But overall, really, those are just my big questions. How does Steven Adams fit into this series? Can he be as impactful as he was in the regular season, or is he just going to keep getting played off the court? So we'll see. Beyond that game, Phoenix played the New Orleans Pelicans in the last game of the weekend. And really, I just want to talk about Chris Paul. Of course, if you've watched this channel, you know he's one of my favorite players. And he completely took over in this one, scoring 19 points, I believe, in the fourth quarter. A lot of them just back to back to back. He had like 17 of the Suns' 19 points in a row to start off the fourth quarter. It was ridiculous. He was completely unstoppable. There was nothing they could do. The Pelicans were down big. They were down by, I believe, more than 20 points in this one, but slowly kind of worked their way back, especially in that fourth quarter. And then Chris Paul's like, all right, we're done. This isn't going to happen anymore. Completely took over. We would go down to the other end of the court, no matter who was guarding him. They had Jose Alvarado on him, who's been a really solid defender this year. They even put Herb Jones, who is a rookie that a lot of people think could make some all-defensive noise this year. It didn't matter because whoever was on him, Chris Paul was just dancing around them, shooting a mid-range, pulling up from three, getting to the basket, whatever he wanted to do. They threw doubles at him. He just passed out of it beautifully. DeAndre Ayton had this one pass that he fumbled that I'm so mad about because it was a beautiful dime. But overall, part of the reason why Phoenix is my favorite to win the championship and so many others is because of Chris Paul. Chris Paul's ability to, when games get tough, when the offense is not really flowing, Chris Paul's like, all right, I'm just going to go get us a bucket. I'm kind of just going to take over for a bit. And something he said at the end of the game in his post-game interview that I liked a lot is they were asking him, when do you flip the switch? And he's like, it felt like we got kind of stagnant. He was like, we've been watching the other playoff games. We've seen the intensity. We've been here and done this before. And things kind of felt stagnant. So I'm like, I'm going to make something happen for us. And that's really what he has done for this Phoenix team the whole time since he's got here. It's so impressive. The Pelicans, I want to give a shout to them. They really fought back in this game hard. Just overall, there's not really much you can do when Chris Paul and really just the Phoenix Suns are a better team. Chris Paul was phenomenal in this one. Same with DeAndre Ayton. He had a really solid game with 21-9, completely neutralizing Jonas Valanciunas. 25-8 from Devin Booker. Chris Paul, like I mentioned, with a 30-point, 10-assist double-double. Just an incredible game from the Suns that shows what they're capable of. The rest of the games, most of them were blowouts other than Bucks Bulls, which we'll get to in a second. But Golden State versus Denver, really what kind of just popped out in this one was Jordan Poole. He was a phenomenal 30 points in the start. Steph Curry came off the bench with his injury. He had 16 points in only 22 minutes, so he really didn't have to play much in this one. They were really just kind of abusing the pick and roll with Nikola Jokic, who did have 25, 10, and 6. Will Barton also had 24. Those are the only two in 20-point scoring. But really, Nikola Jokic just could not do much. He wasn't able to dominate as much as I honestly initially thought, so maybe this is going to be a lot quicker series than I thought it was going to be, but overall, just as I noticed that the banner fell behind me, whatever. The Golden State Warriors just really kind of were clicking on all cylinders in this game. When Steph Curry's back and healthy, they're going to be back to being one of the most formidable teams in the West and on a collision course for probably the Phoenix Suns in the Western Conference Finals is what I at least predicted. But for right now, it was a super dominant showing from them. Shout out to Jordan Poole. He's my most improved player pick, and I think it's kind of insane that he's not even a finalist for the award. He was in the G League last season, and this year you see what he's been doing. That's just me, but overall, I think Jordan Poole is phenomenal, and he really is one of the keys to this run. How is he going to play? We know what Steph's going to do. We do know what Draymond's going to do. Clay, we'll see kind of how healthy he is when he finds that rhythm. He's been finding it pretty recently. I mean, he did have 19 in this game, which was really all they needed from him to score 123. But overall, we kind of know what the big three is going to do, but those outside guys like Wiggins, Jordan Poole, depending on what they do, is really kind of how the Warriors are going to reach the finals if they're able to get there. The next game, Bucks versus Bulls. This was a disgusting game. The Bucks went up huge in this one to start off, but the Bulls really fought back to the point where it was just such a grinded out physical game at the end. Alex Caruso was phenomenal for the Bulls in this one. He only had 7 points, 3 rebounds, and 2 assists, but the defense that he played, especially on Chris Middleton, who only had 11 points in this game, was phenomenal. Ultimately, though, it was just really their lack of interior presence. Giannis had 27 and 16, and Brook Lopez had 18, along with 10 and 12 from Bobby Portis. It just doomed them. They were only able to put up 86 points in this one. So despite holding the Bucks to 93, they couldn't stop them when they needed it most, and DeMar was not good in this game. There's always been that narrative about him choking in the playoffs. I'm not someone who really buys into that narrative, but hopefully he's able to turn it around next game, because if they want any chance of stealing at least a couple games against the Bucks, DeRozan's got to be the DeRozan we saw in the season, and he just wasn't tonight with only 18 points in 43 minutes. Vucevic had 24 and 17. He missed a gimme layup at the end of the game that could have really maybe kept this one close rather than the 7-point deficit that they lost by. 18 and 10 from Zach LaVine, who was decent. But overall, the offense was just not flowing. They couldn't stop anyone in the paint, and we were seeing shades of why a lot of people picked this to be a sweep or a 5-game series. The Bulls have to be better, but I'm not quite sure they have the firepower to keep up with Milwaukee at this point. The last 2 games, starting off with Utah Jazz versus the Dallas Mavericks. The Jazz won by 9 points, no Luka Doncic. The offense was just terrible for the Dallas Mavericks. There's not much they could do. Jalen Brunson did have 24 and 7. He was pretty solid. Spencer Dinwiddie had 22 and 8 assists. But when both of them weren't on the court, it was really bad offense. You need the 2 of them out there because otherwise it was just one playmaker, and the Jazz were really kind of just exploiting that. This was a masterclass defensively from Rudy Gobert. They were going nowhere near the paint because he was there. So shout out to Rudy Gobert. If Luka doesn't come back, this is probably going to be a pretty quick series, and he's already supposed to not play game 2. So the Jazz are probably going to look to take a 2. I mean, the Mavs only lost by 6 points. They could bring this back, but I don't think that the Jazz are going to have a game quite like this. Donovan Mitchell struggled a little bit early. He turned it up in the end with 32 points. I just don't see the Jazz only scoring 99 points again. I think Dallas is going to have to get Luka back, or this might be a quick series. And finally, the Miami Heat eviscerated the Hawks. I'm not going to talk much about this one. It was just dominance. Trae Young really struggled. They had him on clamps. Gallinari had 17, but they really just don't have any answer for the Heat. Duncan Robinson had 27 points with 8 threes. Jimmy Butler had 21, 6 and 4, 16 from PJ Tucker, 10 from Kyle Lowry. They were just dominant offensively and defensively. The Hawks really can't do much in what I think is going to be a pretty quick series. So those were all 8 games. I know that was a lot, but I'm going to be doing these like every day. So hopefully I won't have this many to talk about in a span of time. But overall, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you made it to the end, drop me your favorite playoff series so far or your favorite first game. And also let me know that the playoffs are awesome because I think it's been a great first weekend of the NBA playoffs. We had so many great games, close matchups, and I think we're in for one of the best playoffs in a long time. So I appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you all later. Real one, say it back.